If you discovered a new planet and had the opportunity to send a probe there to gather data, how would you know where on the planet to explore? Would you just drop the probe down into some random spot on the planet and immediately start drilling a microprobe to do detailed chemical analysis of the soil? I don't think that's really the best way to begin. Instead, the best way to begin exploring is to have a satellite in orbit. Then you can find the mountains and the valleys. You can look for large-scale features. Maybe there are oceans or plains. And then, once you have an idea of the whole landscape, it's appropriate to decide what is most important, what is most pertinent, and you can go into that spot for more detailed investigations. Presenting data is exactly the same thing. You don't just go into the details immediately. You first have to paint the broad strokes picture of the entire data set, and then you can move on to discussing whatever details are most relevant, most appropriate for the discussion. The broad strokes picture could be the take-home message, or maybe it's a reminder about the primary purpose of the data set or the key hypothesis that you're testing. Let me give you a demonstration. The reason why this error bar is relatively small is that this is the standard error of the mean, which involves dividing by the square root of n. Because we had an unbalanced design, we ended up with more data points in this category, making the denominator larger and thus the error bar relatively smaller. Okay, that's the end of my presentation. Do you understand at all what this data set is about? Or why these data are important and what they mean? Probably you don't, and the reason why you don't is that I immediately started talking about some tiny little detail that might not even be important for the key message of these data. And if you do have an idea about what these data show, then it's because you were probably ignoring me and instead paying attention to the graph to try and interpret it yourself based on the text in the x labels and the y-axis labels. All right, let me start this presentation again. As I mentioned, the main goal of this study was to determine whether plants grow faster in different conditions and with different nutritional supplements. In this graph, higher bars correspond to larger, healthier growth. Now, I know that there are many bars here because we wanted to test many conditions. The most important piece of this graph for now is this set of bars here all the way on the right, which was the low light and poor soil condition. You can see that the additive, this supplement, really helped the plants to grow. Now, these plants still don't grow quite as well as the plants in the good soil and high light condition. But this is still quite an improvement and could be really useful for bringing healthy plants into difficult growing environments. Now let me recap the important things that I did in my second presentation of these data. As soon as I showed the graph, I reminded the audience of the main purpose of the data set that I'm about to show. Then I oriented the audience to help them interpret the components of the graph, in this case that up means better, healthier plants. Then I directed their attention to the most relevant findings on the graph, while still showing the data for other conditions in case anyone had additional questions about the rest of the experiment. And I didn't even mention that stupid little error bar because it's not relevant for the main finding, and of course if someone is curious, I'd be happy to go into more details about it. I'd like to keep this analogy of exploring a new planet in mind. Remember that you always want to have a look at the broad strokes, large-scale landscape features, and then you can figure out what are the most important details to zoom into.